Good morning and welcome to this week's IGTV. Today I'm talking about why you can't motivate your teenager. No matter if you got a scholarship in cheer squad and you are the best encourager, you cannot motivate your teenager. And actually, why when you continue to motivate your teenager, you are going to get less and less of what you actually wanted. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Okay, so we are going to talk about why you can't motivate your teenager and why this is so frustrating when you don't understand the science behind this. I know you deeply love and care about your teenager, and I know you want the very best for them. And so when you see them struggling or sad or a little down, of course, you try to motivate them because it comes from an intention of love. I absolutely have no question about that. You are a loving, caring parent, and that's why you want to motivate them. Doesn't work. I'm also going to share a little bit of my personal experience having been that teen. So let's jump in, shall we? My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach and a certified relationship systems coach. I am one of only 70 people in Canada to hold both designations. I've been working with parents of teens specifically for the last 16 years to help them end the baffling blow-ups, stressful silences, and painful disconnection to build relationships based on mutual respect, trust, and genuine connection. I've raised 2 teens. They're now adults. And I, just to get a little background, make this a little bit more, I have ADHD. My oldest son has ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. So, it's not, what I'm going to share today will help you whether your child had a little bit of ADHD, you've got something going on there, or neuronormal. Okay. All right. If you have questions about motivating your teen, by the way, post them in the comments because I'd love to include them in this video or future videos. All right, so the first thing, let's talk about how this shows up. Tell me if this sounds familiar, how this shows up. So your teen, probably as a child or as a tween, was like doing fairly well, right? And like going along in life, and they're, accomplishing their accomplishments and friending and schooling and sporting and crafting and hobbying and whatever they were doing. And they were doing it in a way that was like exciting for you to watch. It's so exciting for you to watch them like blooming and becoming the person they are and developing interests and building success, like in friending and schooling and sporting and whatever else, they're doing. And then the teenage years hit. Can we just for a second? And then the teenage years hit. And it's like their bucket of motivation gets a gargantuan hole in the bottom. Sometimes, you might think it was like dripping out the bottom. Other days you're like, does your bucket even like have a bottom? Because it just like dropped out the bottom. And now your teenager seems lethargic, isolated, like they spend a lot of time in their room, on their phones. They seem lazy, like they just don't want to do kind of anything. They don't seem to like the same things that they like. They don't believe in themselves the same amount. And so all of these things have you think you just need a little motivation. I mean, that's what I would want, right? Like you're thinking to yourself, like if I was down, I would want one of my friends or, my partner or something to motivate me, to be like, you got this, like go, yeah, like you can do it, right? Okay. So I get why you're doing it. And again, I know it's absolutely loving intent. I think there's some things that we need to unravel a little bit here as to why this is happening. I need to help you understand why this isn't working. So let's talk about first, let's talk about what's going on in their brain, okay? So if you've watched some of my videos before, you might have heard this. I'm going to say it again. During puberty, around 12, could be 14, could be 11. There's no scientific number. It's a scientific process. So it is different for each child. Their brain is undergoing the second and final growth phase of our human lifetime, and it is a massive renovation. It's a massive renovation, okay? Here are some of the things that go on for them, okay? So their brain is going from a simple computing system to a much more complex computing system, okay? It's actually growing gray matter, not joking. It's actually growing more gray matter in there, and at the same time is trying to develop new software to run that new gray matter. Now, if you ask a software engineer, they're going to tell you that's really stupid, because what you need to do is develop the hardware first. You put the hardware in, and you put the hardware in. Then you put the new software in. So if you heard what I just said, it's that you're putting in one hardware chip at a time, and each day trying to write the software for that chip, but it isn't yet connected to the, it's a circus in there, okay? It's one trapeze short of Cirque du Soleil, and it's important trapeze. So their brain is going through a massive renovation. During this process called, where it densifies, it's called myelination. It is also doing a process called pruning, which is removing good and lovely neural pathways that they liked about themselves and you like too. It's removing those in order to write more complex software code, okay? But some of those good neural pathways that it's pruning have to do with self-esteem, because their identity is actually rewritten. Just slightly alarming. This is just slightly alarming, if you were your teenager. Can you imagine that? You wake up one day and it's like you're, for the next year or so, your entire identity is being rewritten. So their self-esteem can drop up to 30%. Now for girls, the average is 14 on that age. For boys, it can be a little bit later. These are all scientific averages, okay? So their self-esteem goes down. And then as part of the brain renovation, they struggle. A normal teenage brain struggles with motivation. Yep. A normal teenage brain struggles with motivation. Part of this is simply because of the quagmire that is going on in there. They don't have the direct route from, I want this, I'm going to go do this. This was fun yesterday, I'm going to go do it again. I believe in myself. I'm just going to go accomplish this. They don't have those straight lines anymore. When I say quagmire, it is the newest science shows their brain development is actually not complete until they're 28. 28. So they are naturally lacking motivation simply because of the complexity of change and the overwhelming change that's going on in their brain. It literally is like eating all of their mental brain cells and their energy to just be in the brain change, okay? So this means that things that they might have really liked for a long time, they don't like anymore, okay? It means that it's called task initiation, and that is the effort it takes to start a new task or do any task, really. Now, even if it was something that they liked before, whether it was school or sport or a hobby or friends, task initiation, overcoming that inertia of task initiation is very difficult for a teen brain, which is why their brain procrastinates. It's why their brain procrastinates so much. Because they struggle with tasks. Everything feels harder to even get started. And it's like slow motion. Is that do you get what I'm saying? So your teenager's brain is going through a very real, scientifically proven physiological development stage. Now, that is a normal teen brain, okay? Now, from a hormone perspective, we your brain needs dopamine for desire. Dopamine is the hormone that drives desire, okay? In an ADHD brains lack dopamine. So I'm not saying your teenager does or doesn't have ADHD. I'm saying that if your teenager does have ADHD, they have troubles waking up in the morning. It's like they just can't seem to get themselves going. These could be signs of undiagnosed ADHD. Could also just be the teen brain. They look a lot similar for a phase because they naturally lack dopamine. Now, I'm not saying also go run and get them, on some dopamine supplement. No, this is a phase of the teenage brain. So in order to be motivated, they need dopamine. In order to be motivated, they need desire. And desire is a function of a couple things. Desire is a function of confidence. So I have to believe that there is at least a probability that I will succeed at whatever I'm going to go do or have fun, or it will bear fruit, even if it's just pleasure for a moment. Okay. So in order to have desire, I need to first believe that I have a probability of success. The other thing that I need for desire is I need to understand the risk. What is the risk of failure? And what's at risk if I fail? So I have to assess that, okay? And because the teenage brain is often measuring everything in effort and they just want low effort stuff, their desire goes down because they feel like the risk is one of the risks of them taking on this thing is that it's going to take more energy than what they feel like they have. They just don't have that many coins in their energy bin that day. Okay. So again, these are all physiological changes that happen in the teen brain. Okay. Now, if you want to read more about desire, and motivation, strongly recommend Atomic Habits. James Clear, Atomic Habits, great book. The other thing that I need you to understand about, now let's go to you motivating your teen. Okay. At first, you motivating your teen can be a good thing. It can even sound good, okay? It can sound positive and it can sound encouraging and it can sound, lovely, loving, supportive at first. Where motivation goes off the rails is when your teenager doesn't respond to your motivation, loving, support, encouragement. They don't respond to that, and you get pissed. You get resentful and frustrated and angry because no child of yours is going to be lazy. So now you've flipped into judgment. And from judgment, your motivation becomes criticism. So rather than lifting up who your teen is and all things amazing about them that sometimes teenagers forget, their self-esteem goes in their boots. They forget that they're an incredible human being who is getting a new brain and figuring out their life. And your motivation comes from criticism and begins to point out what they're not doing. Did you hear the difference in that? Your motivation initially was wonderful. It was probably encouragement. And I just want to read you the definitions so that you understand the difference, okay? So, okay, let's look up. So to encourage someone is to give them support, confidence, hope. So they will do or continue to do something. To encourage is to help or stimulate. Now that's the slippery slope with encouragement, is to help them continue or do something. Your motivation, which you think is encouraging, is about trying to get them to continue to do something, or do something that you want, that your brain has enough dopamine for 3 of you to get the desire going, to get them off their lazy ass and get going. My gorgeous, loving-hearted, well-intended parent. Your teenager's job is not to do things on your agenda in their life. Okay, I'm not saying they're not to contribute around the house. There shouldn't be boundaries, that they need basic chores. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that even encouragement can turn into criticism, and rather than pointing out what's great about them and who they are and what they already can do, to remind them because they forget, you're now focusing on what they're not doing. So your motivation becomes a reinforcement of what your teenager once felt was important or perhaps wanted, but for whatever reason, as part of a scientifically proven physiological brain development that is not them being lazy, they are not meeting up to this part that you want them to, or they even used to, so you're pointing out what they're not doing. That's not motivation. Never has been. That is criticism, judgment, blame, comparison, and over time, it becomes shame. So even encouragement can twist to the dark side, where you want them to do or continue to do something and they're not. Okay, so that's to encourage. I'm going to read right, so to motivate someone is to stimulate their interest or enthusiasm for doing something. Okay, which again, I think in the beginning was probably lovely, very well intended. But the minute, I hope you're getting this, if this, tap yes, write yes in the comments if this is making sense to you. Loving support and encouragement comes from lifting from the bottom, from sharing with your teen what they are already doing, what you see are their strengths, what you are proud of them of, without an agenda for them doing things your way. When motivation goes over the edge, encouragement goes over the edge, it becomes more of an expectation. Okay, thank you. Becomes more of an expectation, and your resentment is building. How can they be so lazy? I am not raising a lazy ass. Get off. You can do this. How can you just lay around and just decide not to? Look, I have said those things. Inside voice. I've said them. When you behave from that, you cease to point out what is great about your teen and what you believe about them that they need gentle, loving, supportive reminders of when their brain's going through this renovation. And you start pointing out what they're not doing that you want them to do. Because they don't seem to care. They're irresponsible, lazy, unmotivated. Those are the 3 top words that parents write me on a daily basis that they're seeing in their teen. I totally get from an external perspective, that might be what you're seeing. Now I want to talk a little bit about, I already talked about what desire is, okay? So because of massive hormone changes going on in your teenager's brain, there's There's confidence that they're lacking to keep doing things that they might have already been great at. They might be lacking the dopamine that drives desire, or that dopamine in a simplistic brain is going after quick fixes with less risk. So their desire seems to be focused toward social media, gaming, unhealthy friendships, quick dopamine fixes. Whereas now, because the dopamine fix you want for them is put in the effort, do your schoolwork, just hand it in, show up to practice, maybe work a little harder. That takes more effort, which takes more risk. Teenagers are risk adverse simply because of their low confidence. And desire requires a low risk of failure, or the risk of failure not being, what if I truly do suck? Because your teenager's brain and low self-esteem actually goes there. Like that's what they begin. They literally question everything as their entire identity in their brain is being rewritten. Okay? So their risk of trying, which is overcoming task initiation and even starting, so they've got even more procrastination. Their risk of even trying feels bigger, which lowers desire. All required for motivation. I hope that's making sense. Okay. Here's the other thing that I wanted to say to you. When your teenager is struggling, okay, it could just be a function of their brain, and it is a hard time. And yes, it is like a couple years long as their brain is going through this developmental phase. Okay. Their executive function, which is not fully formed until they are 28, is the most recent science, 28 years old. Their executive function does not have the developed adult capacity for complex problem solving, which means I liked this before. Now I can't figure out how to do it in a way that feels safe and good for me, so I'm going to avoid it. Because they don't have complex problem solving to develop the strategic thinking for a new healthy habit, blah, 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 which is all adult level thinking. So teenagers avoid. Rather than confront, analyze what's not working, externalize the problem to say, okay, this doesn't make me a crappy person. This just is, I'm just finding this hard. So what does work for me, and what am I getting? And I'm going to go do that new habit tomorrow. Nope. Teenage brain doesn't necessarily have that. Okay. The teenage brain also, again, struggles with procrastination and task initiation. They are more likely to avoid because that is simplistic, as opposed to develop complex strategic thinking or critical analysis. They don't have that either. They also do not have emotional regulation or impulse control. So when they were doing something that seemed easy before, and now they have anxiety about it, or like are freaking out about, what if this happens, and what if coach doesn't like me, or I didn't get played today, I'm that's it, I'm quitting, right? They don't have emotional regulation either. And if this sounds a lot to you like your teenager has regressed to become a toddler version of themselves, you're correct. They have far more intelligence, but the toddler and teen brain in development are very similar. Okay, last point I'm going to make. Here's why, again, motivation in what you think was motivation, which initially at the very beginning was a beautiful, loving thing because you were lifting from the bottom. When motivation takes a steep turn for the worst, as does encouragement, is when you are providing downward pressure on your teenager because you're coming from a position of criticism and comparison, using labels inside voice even, such as lazy, irresponsible, and unmotivated. The minute you believe that, you will come from a downward pressure place that is reinforcing and pointing out what your teen is not doing and how they are falling short of you, which is essentially saying, I am disappointed in you. And what they hear is you are a disappointment. Okay? Is that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So I'm just going to tell you, so this was my experience. I got it back. Okay. My experience, I was an athlete, an award-winning athlete. I was a straight A student and I was barely coping, literally barely coping. And then the wheels fell off and I went from A's to F's in a matter of 6 months. Stopped showing up to sports, skipping school, all the things. Because why? Because the teenage brain goes to avoid. I didn't have the capacity. Now, this is another thing I need you to hear. When my stress level was so high, knowing I was failing, but not knowing how to stop it, knowing that all those crappy messages about myself, about I'm a failure, I'm stupid, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, were becoming true. They were becoming true. Increased stress levels lower dopamine. So if your teenager is already experiencing stress, which shows up as avoidance, their dopamine level is too low sometimes to overcome the task initiation and the procrastination to do even what is necessary to be done, even if they know it's necessary. Okay? And for me, what happened is that experience of consistent negative critical messages, because I wasn't showing up in the way that people had known me. This isn't you. Well, actually it is. This was me, but it wasn't who people knew me to be. It wasn't with the pleasing version of me. It wasn't the compliant version. It wasn't the smart, snappy, sporty, spice version. All I got was critical, shitty messages about how I wasn't being who people needed me to be to feel good about themselves, because I was changing an entire paradigm. And if you don't think that was happening in my head, you're kidding yourself. And over a period of time, those messages became shame. So in the face of failure, and you don't need to deem something as failure, but your teenager may deem it as a sting of failure. In that moment of failure and humiliation, when your child is met with grace and compassion in their moment of failure or humiliation, when they are met with grace and compassion, science shows that shame message is instantly diminished and it doesn't take hold. And that is what helps build resilience. Now, I'm not saying you're like, oh, it's okay that you got a D, no problem, like you're amazing. No, we're not blowing smoke up anybody's butt either. But it's about saying, look, that sucks. It's knowing what to say to your teenager to take those moments of failure and humiliation so they're met with grace and compassion. So your teenager builds resilience rather than shame, and they build hope. Hope is a way of thinking and behaving that says, okay, that result sucked, didn't love it, but it doesn't define me. It doesn't mean I'm a crappy person. Maybe I had a crappy day. Maybe my teacher had a crappy day. Okay, this is me being human, not perfect. I'm going to go on with tomorrow and see what tomorrow brings. That's hope. Okay? So it's critical. The more you try and motivate your teenager, this is the last reason I wanted to bring up why it doesn't work. Because there is a psychological process, two psychological simultaneous processes going on in their brain as part of this wild and wonderful brain development called differentiation and individuation. Differentiation is where your teenager is required literally to just disagree with everything that you say, and they're right about everything they say, even if it is so obvious that they are wrong and you are right, and you're an adult and you have more perspective and you've been on this earth longer. Their job is to push back against everything that is you, to be different than you. Their job is to be different in you for the purpose of survival. From about 12, 14 to like 18, in order so that they are developing their own social hierarchy, economic structure, values, beliefs, and just because you birthed them or raised them does not mean that their values and beliefs are going to be your values and beliefs. But is their job to push against what they have been told is true by you, which was fine, to go figure out what they believe is true. So differentiation makes them automatically defensive. That's right. That's right. So the more you attempt to motivate, even if what you're saying is good and true and right, like, you know what, put in a little effort, hand in your assignments, just do the minimum. Like, how hard is it? I know it makes sense, right? We're adults. Your teenager will still and may still diabolically sabotage themselves because your consistent messages to motivate them are triggering all kinds of their defensiveness, and they are differentiating, so they are pushing back against you and doing the exact opposite of what you want, even though what you are saying is right and makes sense. Is there anyone else who finds that really frustrating? Or is it just me? It's incredibly frustrating. It is incredibly frustrating. But you're going to get met with, you will know when your motivation or encouragement has gone down the slippery slope, when you get more defensiveness. You'll know. Your teenager's pushing back against what is good and right because of the way it's being delivered. Part of this is a function of their brain. They're lacking dopamine, and in high stress situations, if they're really feeling down on themselves or struggling, they're going to lack dopamine again. So the inside voice thing, I want to answer that question. How do you keep your inside voice inside? You do your work to change that inside voice. That's what you do. That's what I did as a parent. Because I know what it's like as a teenager to be on the receiving end of that. And teenagers have spidey senses antenna because their brain is so hypervigilant at an emotional level, because that their executive function isn't developed. So they are emoting machines, and they also know what you say and what you mean before you meant it or said it. They are so hyper aware at an emotional level. So keeping your inside voice inside isn't about that. It's about you doing the work outside of your relationship with your teen to work through your frustration. What are your expectations? And what are you holding as true that may not be actually true, that is based in your own fear of losing control as a parent, your own fear that your child is going to become unemployable and homeless and under a bridge, which is also untrue. It's catastrophized. None of that is true. Because when you anchor in the truth that this is a function of their brain, and that what they need most is lifting from the bottom up, to remind them how much you love them, to walk beside them rather than behind them pushing and shoving, that you walk beside them every day, letting them know that you are there, that you love, support them unconditionally, that, yeah, life is going to be hard. Yep, it's going to be hard. I'm here with you. I can't do it for you. But I will remind you of your greatness when you can't see it. And I'm also going to tell you when you're being a poop. So keeping the inside voice inside, I know, feels hard. And on those days, go and get your frustration and go and address what that is about for you. That's how you do that. If you want more information on the difference between motivating and encouraging, and your teenager is struggling, I totally hear you. Just write support. Just put support down in the comments. This video will appear on my Instagram. If you're on YouTube, I'd love a subscribe. Just write support below, and I'll send you some of my free resources. This is a really hard time because, number one, no one told you it was going to happen, and number two, nobody told your teenager it was going to happen. So awesome. Maple and Crew, I'm going to get you to write it again after, because as soon as I end this video, all your comments disappear. So all of you, Lil 34, if you guys can just hang on for 10 seconds till this gets posted on my Instagram profile and on YouTube, and then go write support, I will get it to you. Oh, look at all you lovelies. Thank you, you guys. These comments are going to disappear the moment that I turn this video off. So if you give me half an hour, it'll be reposted on my Instagram here, and you can come find it, and then I'll get you all of those resources. That's the word I'm trying to. Okay. Thank you so much. You can always find resources if you're on Instagram. If you tap my name, and then there's a link in my profile. You can check out my website, alipayne.com, for tons of free resources. I have a free masterclass as well. And if you're on YouTube, thank you always for watching. This whole motivating and encouraging thing comes from, I know, a loving intention. It feels normal and natural. What I need you to understand is what is actually happening, and the price in your relationship with your teen of continuing perhaps to do this in a way that isn't working. It is disconnection, it is painful, it is reinforcing shame, and it creates more defensiveness, defiance, and actually pushes your teenager away more than what you might be wanting. So thanks for joining me today. I'll see you next Thursday. Bye, everybody.